Transgender denoting or relating to a person whose self-identity does not conform unambiguously to conventional notions of male or female gender. Transvestite, a person, typically a man, who derives pleasure from dressing in clothes traditionally worn by the opposite sex. Drag queen, a man who dresses up in women's clothes, typically for the purposes of entertainment. Note: at the time of the Stonewall riots, the gay community did not have the same extensive vocabulary to describe sexuality as we do today. Marsha Johnson and Sylvia Rivera were transgender women, but primarily referred to themselves as drag queens or transvestites, which have separate meanings today. Transvestite is now considered a derogatory term. She quickly became a prominent fixture in the LGBTQ community, serving as a drag mother by helping homeless and struggling LGBTQ youth, and touring the world as a successful drag queen with the Hot Peaches.
Marsha P. Johnson, born as Malcolm Michaels Jr. in 1945, New Jersey, began to fight for transgender rights as early as the 1960s with Sylvia Rivera, whom she met at the Stonewall Inn, Manhattan. Nike. Johnson was celebrating her 25th birthday at Stonewall, June 28, 1969, when police began a raid at the inn for selling alcohol without a license. When they began arresting LGBTQ patrons, the community had had enough. Too many times where businesses across Manhattan where LGBTQ people had gathered had been raided by the police, and too many times had LGBTQ people been arrested for their sexuality. At the time, it was normal and expected for police officers to check women in the club to verify their sex, and arrest any cross-dressers and drag queens. According to witnesses, the police sexually harassed lesbian patrons at the bar whilst frisking them. At this point, a crowd of straight allies had gathered around the inn, as they watched with disgust and horror as employees and drag queens alike were dragged outside and violently handled before getting tossed into police cars. At last, when a police officer clubbed a butch lesbian, a masculine lesbian named Stormy Delavery, over the head for saying that her handcuffs were too tight, a riot broke out and the crowd was booming with anger. Nobody could stay silent about the homophobic actions of the law enforcement anymore.
Johnson was one of the first people to resist the police that night. The riots helped begin the spread to surrounding neighborhoods in New York, until they were heard of all over the state and created an uproar from New Yorkers. Their bravery to stand up to the law enforcement, along with the LGBTQ patrons from Stonewall Inn, led to the first gay liberation movement. Only 1 year after the riots, the first gay pride parades were held, and only 2 years after there were gay rights groups in almost every major city in America. After Stonewall, Marsha and Sylvia co-founded the organization STAR, or Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, a group for the homeless young drag queens/transgender youth and trans women of color. Johnson dedicated her life, along with Rivera, to fight for equality. Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera serve as strong reminders for not only the LGBTQ community, but straight people alike, that even when the world is all against us and everyone is trying to bury you alive with hate, we must believe that they are wrong, and have the strength and courage to stand for your beliefs in what is right. And if others try to pull us down to their level of hatred, pay it no mind.
Who even was Marsha P. Johnson? I get that she was a transgender woman, but what did she really do?
Marsha was an African-American transgender woman, who was an LGBTQ rights activist for transgendered people, and most importantly, trans women of color. Born Malcolm Michaels Jr., Marsha experienced a difficult childhood, due to her strong religious upbringing. She started to cross-dress at an early age. She was quickly reprimanded for doing such. In New York, Johnson struggled to make ends meet. She had to live on the streets, but engaged in becoming a drag queen at night, even making all of her own costumes, mostly made of what she could afford from thrift shops. Marsha quickly became infamous in the LGBTQ community, earning a title as the drag mother by helping homeless and struggling LGBTQ youth find their way. Sadly, at the age of 46, on the 6th of July, 1992, Marsha's body was found floating in the Hudson River off the West Village piers. Police initially ruled her death a suicide despite claims from her friends and other members of the local community that she was not suicidal. In 2015, the Marsha P. Johnson Institute was established. Its mission is to defend and protect the human rights of transgender and gender non-conforming communities. Marsha is honored as a Stonewall instigator, an anti-Warhol model, a drag queen, a son, and a revolutionary trans activist.
You.